Good morning, Kevin. How are you?
Good, thanks. Bede and yourself?
You're not bad.
What are we going to talk about today?
What we're going to talk about today is it's quite an important subject. It's this whole thing of self-acceptance, because most of human life, unfortunately, or this is the way it works, is it's characterized by self-rejection.
Mm-hmm.
And what I mean by that is that, have you ever had the experience where I'm angry and I don't like it? I'm feeling inferior and I don't like it.
Yeah.
I'm feeling hateful and I don't like it.
Yeah.
I'm feeling jealous, but I don't like it. I'm
Mm-hmm.
feeling envious, but I don't like it. I'm feeling bored and I can't stand it. I'm feeling empty and I want to be full. I don't like being empty. There is this habitual experience of as we as human beings of what Swami Dayananda calls self-dissatisfaction. We are dissatisfied with ourselves. We don't like ourselves. And that's the subject that I want to sort of talk about first of all. But I just want to point out, you see, what's so brilliant about Swami Dayananda is that if you just say unhappiness, that doesn't necessarily show what it is. But what he shows is that by his expression, self-dissatisfaction, is that what he's saying is that here I am, centered on me, my I feeling, the person I'm experiencing myself to be. I don't like it and I hate it and I want to get away from it. In other words, and if we were to put this in colloquial language, we would call it, I am feeling bad about myself.
Yeah.
And the thing is that if I'm feeling bad about myself, I can't help but have the pressure and the strong desire to feel good about myself.
I was just about to say that you know, there'll be this natural, if you're feeling bad about yourself, and you don't like that, which is normal. Yeah, I'll be constantly wanting to feel good about myself as well, which is, you know, and just striving to do that. But but it won't solve the problem that every so often I'm going to feel quite bad about myself.
Yeah. And this is where when you want to know this, you know, when we're looking at like psychodynamically, what causes the pressure of what Swami Dayananda calls a binding desire, is that the thing is that here I am caught in self-misery. I'm miserable about myself. And normally speaking, as we've talked about, this is not a thing that people really like to acknowledge, because what happens is that if, let's say, for example, I don't like myself, I don't approve of myself, there is a very delicious human experience that frees me from this, what seems to free me from this. Did you know that, Kevin?
Yes.
And that experience is people approving of me. Because if people approve of me, or love me, or think that I'm a nice person or a good person, right?
Well, they compliment you and about what you're talking about, and you think, oh, I'm okay now.
So what happens is that what happens is the experience of being approved of and accepted by other people becomes binding. It's a little bit like, imagine that you've got a terrible migraine and then someone gives you a pill. How attractive is that pill going to become?
It's going to be very attractive.
I'm going to love the pill. But in actual fact, I don't love the pill. I love being free of the intense pain, don't I?
Yeah, yeah.
So I'm going to give an exaggerated importance to the pill. I'm going to have a passion for the pill.
Yeah.
And this is the dynamics of what Swami Dayananda calls a binding desire.
Mm.
Because what happens is that we have this experience of ourselves being unacceptable to ourselves. We just hate being what we are like. And we hate the experience of ourselves. And so we can't help but compulsively try to do something about it.
Well, the general experience would be that we're constantly going between the two, where we're feeling good about ourselves and feeling bad about ourselves. Like, mostly people don't, it's just too painful to be staying with this experience of totally rejecting yourself. You're constantly looking for things so you can feel good about yourself.
That's what they mean in Vedanta by the life of becoming.
Mm.
We're constantly trying to become something in our own eyes that we will like.
Mm.
And it is actually, this striving is our psychological life. This is what it consists of, the highs and lows of our psychology.
Mm.
When, you see, for example, if I feel miserable about myself and I feel I don't like myself, and then you come along and you say, Bede, you're actually quite a nice person. And you go, oh, really, do you think so? Now, the thing is that that's a high.
Mm.
But the next moment, you might say, Bede, you're a bit of a jerk.
Mm.
That's a low. Now, the other thing too is that we all know that rejection by others is a tremendously painful experience, isn't it?
Mm. Mm.
And we think that the rejection, actually, the pain of the rejection has its source in other people, because that's the experience.
Yes.
But what's happened is that people, our relationships with people and how they see us act as a very important defense against this feeling of self-hatred or self-depreciation or self-dissatisfaction.
Mm. Mm.
And so when they're performing well, when we manage to put ourselves in a relationship with them where they're accepting us, we feel good about ourselves, and we even feel very good about them because they are giving us what we need. They're like the pill.
Mm. Mm.
But the moment they don't, what happens is that experience of being free from self-dissatisfaction or self-hatred suddenly is gone. And what happens is the experience of self-hatred comes to the fore in all its glory.
Mm. Mm.
We think that the person has actually rejected us and that they are the cause of this tremendous feeling, of this self-feeling that's extremely unpleasant. But in actual fact, it's a revelation of this fundamental problem that Swami Dayananda talks about, that is centered on me. It's not really saying anything about other people. I'm not saying it's pleasant to be rejected by other people. What I'm saying is that the intense pain of that experience was with us before the rejection occurred. And the defenses against it suddenly are not there, and now we're faced with it. Now, this is extremely important, because when we really see that our problem, our difficulty is centered on me, right here, right now, as I am, unless there's a shift in me, right here, right now, as I am, there is no hope. What I can do is I can manipulate you and say, well, no, that's not true. I'm not like that. But any form of action that I take, because you see, we're obsessed with using doing and having to fix our problems.
I think it's a lot to do if we think objects, happiness is in objects, or in the form of object situations or people.
That's true, but that's true, because we think that we have a very strong, convincing experience that's true, because if you get social praise or acceptance, that's a delicious experience. We feel better. So we're convinced that the happiness comes from the praise and approval.
But we don't recognize when we obtain a favorable situation or a favorable comment or a favorable object, we don't recognize that the happiness of experiences that we're not wanting or not a needing person.
Well, I don't want to go into this. That's true, but I just don't want. I want to go into the right. What I want to point out is this: the experience is that my experience of myself greatly improves, doesn't it? If I'm experiencing the delicious feeling of praise and approval.
Yes.
So my obsessive desire for getting approval has been consummated.
As long as I think my happiness or sense of well-being or feeling good about myself is dependent on what other people are approving me or disapproving of me.
Yes, but what I'm pointing out is the reason I think that is quite reasonable. Because I have you see, what counts here is the emotional experience. It's not an intellectual thing. You see, the emotional experience is I feel good about myself when people love and approve of me. Now I have a thought, I can get happiness from people.
So that you think the location of your happiness and well-being is in other people, depending on what other people say to you.
Well, it's actually true. Because when people give you praise and approval, it feels good. But what I'm saying is it doesn't really resolve the problem. You get relief from the pressure of the binding desire.
This fundamental self-dissatisfaction.
The desire to do something about it. The binding, you see, the thing that I want to say is that we desperately want approval and acceptance from other people. When we get it, we feel good. Because we feel good, we just know that happiness comes from other people. It's a logical, it's an experiential conception that we have. It's not just simply a philosophical thought in my head.
No.
And it's so important to me because the feeling that's centered on me, I hate myself, I don't like myself, magically disappears when people praise and approve of us. And hence we have an exaggerated importance for people giving us approval or acceptance. That's why we brag, and that's why we try and look good, and this is, because what's at stake here is our feeling of unhappiness. It's relentless. While we have this pain centered on ourselves, this emotional pain centered on ourselves, unless while we have that, we cannot help but compulsively pursue anything, person, object, or thing that's going to seem to give a remedy for it. But what I want to point out, we're not denying that it seems to solve it. It's very delicious and quite nice when you get the social approval that you want. Of course it is.
Yes. So what we're describing, this would apply to, what appears to be a very confident CEO who can give a smooth and very consistent presentation in front of hundreds of people. He may feel he will still have he's likely to have this he's going to have this self-dissatisfaction as long as he thinks his happiness is dependent on seeking self-approval.
Well, you can get these success gurus that are in the West. They talk about achieving and all of this sort of stuff, and they can give this beautiful social performance of their confidence, of their ability, of their positivity, all of that stuff. And then when people look at that, they go, oh my God, I'd love to have that. Because they represent an ideal, a picture of themselves that they could be, that would solve this fundamental self-dissatisfaction. Because they have the idea that if I could be like that, then this pain that's centered on me will resolve. And but you can't, you see, just knowing about this does not resolve it. Like, I remember when I was young and I was studying psychology, and I was about 19, 20, and I thought I was so smart. You know, I thought that because I knew the theory, that I was somehow free of it all. You know, I had this egoic feeling of being a little bit superior. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
And so I thought, oh yeah, I know what I'm talking about. And you know, but the thing is, I can know all about the fact of that all of human life is defensive. I can know it's a compulsive struggle to feel good about myself because I have a fundamental self-dissatisfaction centered on me. I can know all about that. But that is not going to resolve the problem. It's the first part. And the first part is the complete and utter recognition that I'm helpless before this condition. There's a certain maturity here, Swami Dayananda says, that, oh, here I am, no matter what I try in terms of activities or no matter who I meet or fall in love with or don't fall in love, nothing fixes this.
Well, there's experiences, there's temporary fixes, but it's mixed with an angst and an anxiety of self-dissatisfaction.
Well, I wouldn't really call it a temporary fix. It's the experience of it being fixed, but in reality, it's still there because the pain is appearing in the form of me trying to get approval, status, or whatever. Now we come to the crux. You see, when we experience at any one moment we have a self-feeling, don't we? A feeling of ourselves. Like right now, I have a self-feeling. I'm here and I'm talking to you. That might be a relaxed feeling. It might be a nervous feeling, whatever it might be. But we're always in a self-feeling. Have you noticed that? Now, what Swami Dayananda means by these self-feelings is he calls it an attitude. Now, I was very interested in this because when I was reading him, I couldn't wait to get to sit down beside him and say, what do you mean by attitude? You know what I mean? Because I knew I'd always had the idea that attitude was something you have or do. Because I was a Westerner, and of course it's something. And he said a very interesting thing to me. He said, the attitude is the individual. It pervades the individual. Now, this is a really interesting thing because, and you see, let's imagine that I'm angry. If I'm angry, if I'm in an angry attitude, now, then everything about me will conform to that attitude. Can't help it. It's a law. So if I'm angry with you, am I going to have thoughts like Kevin's a nice bloke?
No, I think all of your thoughts will conform to being angry.
They will completely and utterly conform perfectly with the attitude. Given my attitude, I cannot help but have certain thoughts. Given my attitude, my self-feeling, this feeling of myself, I can't help but have certain feelings. Given my attitude, I can't help but have certain physiological reactions, maybe tighter breathing, my face is like this.
I think I feel pretty hot under the collar, Bede.
That's it. Feeling the tone of my voice is going to, so even if I hide it, but and my actions will conform to the anger. Now, in the West, we have various schools of psychotherapy. Some deal with thinking. Okay, you've got to think more positive about Kevin. I mean, he may be a bit of, he may do things you don't like, but really you can, reframe your thinking. But the problem is I'm stuck in an attitude of am angry. So I can do that as much as I like. Or because the attitude remains fixed. So the thinking that goes along with it is part and parcel of it.
Yeah.
I get some people, well, how about expressing my feelings, getting my feelings out? That's a very popular way. Again, that's not the root. That is just the expression. This expression of this attitude. And what about the physiological things? Well, you can relax the muscles, and that's very, very good. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
But it's still not going to solve this fundamental sense of myself as I am. What about behavior? Yep, I can change behavior, but the problem is, and I can force myself not to do certain things, but the problem is that what Swami Dayananda is saying is that this self-feeling, this attitude, does that make sense?
Yeah.
That I am being. I'm enclosed in it. And do I choose it? Do I choose this attitude? Do I choose to be angry?
No, I think it just happens, and that's actually their way of seeing. They think they feel very right about being angry. They don't think they're just being angry. They're experiencing.
Yes, they might feel bad about being angry, but they're going to just be angry. What happens is it gets these attitudes that have been built into us from the past are constantly being activated every minute of the day. So at any one time, I'm always in an attitude. It involves me entirely.
So in terms of, you're distinguishing, but an attitude from being angry is quite different from just having an angry thought, aren't you?
Yeah, it's a self-feeling. This is the point. You see, let's imagine I scratch a blackboard. Do you feel that?
Yeah.
Now, that didn't knock out your awareness of yourself, did it? It didn't actually change the attitude that you're having now. You noticed that you had an unpleasant sensation, but you remained the same before it, didn't you? Some people wouldn't, by the way. They go, ooh. but that sensation of the blackboard being scratched or a shovel being used on the concrete, dragged along the concrete, very unpleasant experience, right? Now, what happens is that with other people, we've had experiences of being rejected, and we've had experiences of all various kinds. And what happens is these experiences was our way of being back then. And what happens is they get triggered today, and we literally become these attitudes. I am bored. I am lonely. I am sad. I am angry. I am anxious. I am empty. I am annoyed.
And I am jealous, but I won't sort of say, yes, I'm having this idea that I'm being jealous or I'm being bored.
That's the point, Kevin. It's not having, you see, you can have a jealous thought. It just comes and goes.
Yeah.
That's not the problem, actually.
It's being jealous, having the experience of being jealous.
Because when we are being jealous, we will act jealous. We will start getting envious, and the rivalry, the malice that I was telling you about.
And in that state where there is this attitude, which is all consuming, we don't have access to what we might ordinarily know. We're living out that attitude. We're
blindly dramatizing subjectivity, yes.
And with no, if you like, discriminative intellect involved in.
No.
It's not available to us actually in that what might be called a reactive state.
Well, in actual fact, our thinking will be governed by the attitude, because it's like like the alcoholic. You say, well, why do you drink? Well, I think it's so long as you drink in moderation, it's fine. his thinking is going to serve his desires and aversions. It's not free. It's completely governed. Now, so the problem is that here we are. Each moment we look at someone and bang, this attitude gets triggered, or we look at a situation, oh, I can't stand this, or we're constantly chopping and changing. We never ever, we're constantly changing. It's like we're never what Swami Dayananda, says, the core person. We're not appreciating the core person. We're chopping and changing. There's no sameness. It's just I'm one thing one moment, I'm another thing the next moment, I'm another thing the next moment. You see what I mean? So there's no, what I want to emphasize now is there's no sameness. There's just when I'm angry, it's vastly different than when I'm sad.
With these sort of reactive attitudes, I think I could call them.
Yes, they react. That's right. The basis of these attitudes is reaction. The basis is not being alive to facts.
And so Swami Dayananda would say in these reactive attitudes, you're not being the basic, conscious, appreciative person.
No. What you're doing is what you're being is you're being the psychological attitude. You're actually literally what he says is that you and the emotion become one and the same.
And you're just living out that blindly with
Can't help it.
Even if you, when you weren't in that, if you weren't in that reactive attitude, you might know certain things and understand certain things, but in these reactive attitudes, all of that is not available for you.
No, even if you're daydreaming, it's an attitude.
Which is quite frightening to appreciate what that means, how important it is to find an understanding where you're not living your life in
well, actually, it's not so much finding it. It's true finding and understanding. What's important is that given that we're enclosed in these attitudes that are constantly chopping and changing, happy one moment, a happy attitude, a sad attitude, an elated attitude, a bored attitude, an empty attitude, a sad attitude, an anxious attitude. You know what I mean? The story of our human life, right? If we could discover an attitude that was not a product of our psychological past or the operation of our psychology, the mechanical operation of our psychology, that would be very good, would it not?
Yeah, so what do you mean by a product of our psychological past or product of our psychology?
Well, when I said about the blackboard,
yeah,
the only reason that you can experience that shivering feeling is that you've had it before. It's been built into you. That sensation has been built into you as a past memory, and that memory has been activated when I said I'm scratching the blackboard.
And I didn't like it even in the first.
Even in the present, what happened was it came alive again in the present. And the problem is that when past attitudes come alive in us, they're a total package. They're a way of seeing. Imagine I'm a little kid. I'm about 4 years old. I don't feel very big, do I? I feel sort of small and insecure, don't I?
Yes.
That's why we have a lot of insecure and small feelings as an adult, because they're not only just simply feelings, they're ways of seeing everything. Does that make sense? So they're constantly being activated. Now, but what I want to point out is that we have to understand that we're helpless before this. We think we can do something about this, you see. We can use our will, and by an action of doing or having, we think we can remedy this self-dissatisfaction. So we believe we can, by doing something, and we've got a lot of evidence for this. If you go and see some friends and you brag a little bit, or you get a bit of approval, you'll be fine, right? So we do think we can do it, or we have lots of popularity or friends or whatever, of course we feel good.
And if we go to a movie, that we can lose ourselves in the movie and not be.
We can forget the pain. Yep.
Yeah.
Our culture offers a tremendous amount of methods to forget the pain and the suffering.
The iPhones and iPads seem to be ubiquitous in terms of losing yourself in distraction. So
I'll just use that, just in case someone's listening. When the word ubiquitous means everywhere, all over the place. Okay, go again.
We have it seems very prevalent or ubiquitous in society that people are looking for distraction at every moment with iPhones and iPads, allowing them to lose themselves in that activity, so they're not aware of the self-dissatisfaction which is otherwise there, because that's
our whole life is built around avoiding the feeling of being self-dissatisfied.
Because every action we do is based on a desire.
Yes.
And if the desire in this case, there's a pressure to remove the self-dissatisfaction, or whether we call it a boring attitude or whatever. It's a pressure there because we don't find ourselves acceptable.
Yes. Now that's an important distinction. We're not knocking desires. Swami Dayananda says there's a big difference between wanting a car and wanting a car so I can feel good about myself. You see, and the psychology of the Gita does not deal with desires. It does not even say that desires are wrong. Desires are a privilege as far as Swami Dayananda is concerned. We're talking about the desires for people and things and activities that will free us from the sense of immense self-dissatisfaction. Now, we're not going to go into the solution of this yet, and let's not move into that, Kevin, but I do want to say this. If we could come to an appreciation of ourselves in which the self-dissatisfaction was simply not there, how valuable would that be?
Very valuable.
Now, this is extremely important because, and the next time we will go into dealing with this, but you see, where Swami Dayananda is brilliant is that we normally think we have these issues. I've got an anger issue, I've got a depression issue, I've got a bored issue, I've got an emptiness issue, I've got a sadness issue, you know. But what he says is that all of those things are just this basic form in one thing, the basic feeling of I am dissatisfied with myself. Now, this is great, actually, because if right here, right now, as I am, if that self-dissatisfaction was resolved, relatively speaking, suddenly all of the binding pressure to become happy could not possibly be there, because the binding pressure to be happy is only because I'm unhappy already. Does that make sense? I just want to see, when we're talking about karma yoga, the practice of karma yoga, why it's so important psychologically is that the whole purpose of it is to neutralize the binding desires, the desires that bind us, this pressure to get and to have. Now, but this can only occur if in myself, if there is a transformation of attitude, if there is a shift in me in which I come to appreciate myself in such a way that there is no self-dissatisfaction. And the reason I'm emphasizing this now is that we'll talk more about this, how we bring this about. I just want to stick to the value of this. if I can come, if there is a transformation of my attitude, if I can discover an attitude in which I am content in myself without the aid of approval or money or having or not having. This is a thing of tremendous value, and it is only in this direction is a solution to be found.
Well, it's going to be very valuable, because as long as we're looking for happiness in external objects in the form of people, situations, and things, we don't have control of that, but we'll be constantly trying to control those things for our happiness, because we believe that's.
But the important point here is that we can't help but compulsively do that while we're self-dissatisfied. Unless we can resolve this self-dissatisfaction centered on me, which is always manifesting as an attitude. I am being unhappy. I am being angry. I am being lonely. I am being confused. Unless there is actually a shift in me, a shift of attitude, it's not going to be possible to resolve. We can't neutralize the binding desires, because the pressure of the binding desire, I want to emphasize the pressure of the binding desire. This pressure to acquire certain objects or to do certain things will always be there, because they defend me against this self-dissatisfaction. So when we look at, have you noticed that in life we tend to do the same things, we make the same mistakes, we seem to go through the same problems. No matter what we do, nothing seems to fix.
Yeah.
It can't. And this is the thing. We honestly believe that we can do something about this. Now,
but that comes down to, like, we think our happiness is in a big house, a red car, whatever. Like, and the problem is thinking happiness. That you need those things for your living in your life, but your happiness isn't dependent on them. So it's quite.
Yes, but I just want to emphasize, it's not. That's true. We think that. But we've got a very good, but we have what I'm saying is we have a pressure, an emotional pressure towards those things. It's not just simply a light thought.
No.
It's a life and death issue. It's not like, well, I've got dependence on people and think, no. I have a compulsion, a strong surge of attractiveness and passion for having certain things and doing certain activities. And thinking in certain ways, because it gives me the experience of freedom from the self-dissatisfaction. Now, the point here is I cannot do something about it. You see, people think they can do something about this. You have choice over action, but you do not have any choice whatsoever about this reactivity stuff. And you see, the philosopher Emerson said a very interesting thing. He said, the problem with New Year's resolutions is that it's the same old lawbreaker who makes them. The ego can't fix the ego. I cannot fix myself. So here we are, as we're caught in this situation where we are stuck with ourselves as we are, and we are completely and utterly helpless. In terms of what we do or have, it will not resolve the problem.
Yeah.
This is the point I wanted just to bring up, just to get to today. No matter what you do, no matter what book you read, no matter what spiritual philosophy you understand, you can read as much Vedanta as you like. That is not going to, that is not going to resolve the problem. You see,
but there is a solution. There is a solution.
There is a solution, but it is not in
having and doing.
It is not to do with having and doing, and it's not using our faculties to fix it. But what is important is that there is a recognition of our helplessness concerning this. There's a certain maturity then, because when we recognize that here I am, no matter what I do, nothing seems to work. But this is a great, even though this helplessness seems helpless or hopeless, this coming to this point where I recognize I'm helpless before myself, I'm helpless the way I am, everything that I've tried and am doing is not working, and that unless there's an actual transformation of attitude, the word transformation is very interesting. It means trans, across, form, going from one form to another. So here we are, we're in a we're enclosed in reactive attitudes, which are our suffering. So being these attitudes is what suffering is. So if we can have a transformation of our attitude, the totality that we are as an individual, if there's a transformation, a movement from one form to another form, what Swami Dayananda calls from being subjective to being objective. But that's not some theoretical thing. When you're actually being objective in the way that he means, and I'm not going to go into what that means right now, but there is a transformation of attitude. You see, when I'm miserable, I can read Swami Dayananda and it says, oh yes, being objective is the important thing. But if I'm miserable, I'm not being objective. Being objective is not knowing about objectivity. Being objective is there's an attitude shift from being subjective to being objective, which is what we're going to be going into. But today, all I wanted to do was just to really clarify what we're doing here. That the whole practice of karma yoga is to bring about a transformation of attitude, and to live and to abide in that attitude, which is free of all of these reactive attitudes, while we're living. This is the whole point of karma yoga. But that's all I wanted to go into. So is there anything that before we end off, you want to say? Or
just by living, we mean how we're relating to people, to the world.
Yeah, we mean that. We mean, you see, Swami Dayananda says that karma yoga is not a discipline, and it's not a practice. Karma yoga, in the way he means it, is you're actually practicing living.
It's a lifestyle.
The way you are living. The way you are living becomes your spiritual practice. Living itself becomes a spiritual practice. It's not like there's me and then I've got this thing called karma yoga. Karma yoga is a way of living in which I am not suffering from these reactive attitudes. And so that I'm alive to what is happening and I can respond to what's happening. So that's a good point, but we're going to be going more into that. All right. Well, thank you very much, Kevin.
Thank you, Bede.
And I'll see you next week.
Okay, look forward to it.
Bye-bye.